you can see on my chart here that, and also you can see on the BloodHound interface, I have loaded up the signal moving average bounce system, right? So every time price comes near this moving average and it bounces off, you get a signal, right? So, and I know this kind of applies to several people's systems out there. I worked with some customers who use the top dog system, for example, and I think, in one of his trading rules is, I think he likes to, I think he's saying that something to the fact like the second bounce is the most profitable or has the highest odds of success or something like that. And I've been asked by customers, how can you test like the first or the second or the third to kind of figure out in your own system, or if you're using someone else's system like Top Dog or NextGen or whatever, to try and kind of do some back testing and figure out, which one of these, signals kind of gives you the highest odds, highest return rate, or whatever. So we're going to figure out today how to isolate, which signal, in the same trend, how to isolate it, so that way you can back test just that whatever iteration signal that you want. So all right, just check the message board here. So, all right, good morning, Randy, and good morning to all the rest of you. I know for some of you it's already lunchtime. So, all right, well, good. I don't see anything coming in, so we'll just continue on and keep on going with this. All right, so as you can see, I'm using an existing template here. So this template is available on our website. You can download it. There's two places you can download it from: the recorded webinar location, or you can go to our downloads area and download this BloodHound template. Let's see here. So I'll just pull up the documentation first. And it's not in the documentation, but that just pulls up the website automatically. So probably you might want to start, probably the best location to get that file from is to go to the training workshops, and we'll find it in the recorded workshop area. So up here we got recorded webinars, and so that's a link, and that'll take us in here. And if I remember right, I believe I did this first in November. And let's see, nope, not November. All right, so let me check October. There we go. So it's in October. There's two of them here, so they're pretty similar. This moving average bounce 2 is a slight modification, but this is the one that I'm using, this moving average bounce system. And so here's the download buttons, so you can get the Ninja Traders chart template and the BloodHound template. All right, so there's that. That'll get you going. So you can start with this base system here. So I don't want to work on top of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the name of this. That way I don't overwrite it. So I'm going to start with last week's workshop name and just put the new date in there. All right. And another thing just to kind of point out before I get going is I made what, I don't know, might be a slight improvement. I kind of think it might be an improvement and I'll point out what I found. So, oh, not here. Hold on, let me add my favorite toolbar indicator onto my chart. So when I loaded that chart template up, this is going back to last year, I wasn't running this toolbar shortcut. So I need to add that on here. Okay. Now I'm going to resave my chart template. So just to be clear, this has nothing to do with BloodHound. This is just saving my NinjaTrader chart template for future use. Let's see, I believe it is, yeah. So that's the chart template. So I'm just going to save over it. Okay. All right, so what I was wanting to point out to you is this bar right here. See how this is a doji bar? So the way that the original solver I used in this moving average bounce system, I'm going to minimize this guy here. The original moving average bounce system used a bar direction. And because this doji doesn't have any kind of body in the bar, so it actually kind of skipped this. It skipped this signal here. So, like if I plug that in, right? You see how that signal goes away, but I would consider that a valid signal. So I kind of improved upon this bar direction here by using a comparison solver. So let me kind of show you how I set this up. And I should probably give this a name here. So let's just call it a bar direction comparison. And so what I'm doing is I'm comparing the closing price to the high and low of the bar. So I'm getting the high and low of the bar from SI Chameleon. So as I open this up, right, you see I have SI Chameleon here, and so if the closing price, if this closing price is at or near the high of the bar, I'm getting a long signal, and if the closing price is at the low of the bar, then I get a short signal. Now keep in mind, this only works with range bars. So you can see I'm using a range bar. And of course, when you're using a range bar, the close always closes at either the low or the high of the bar. So that's why it works with this particular bar type. So if you're using a tick chart or a minute chart, this solver won't actually work, because your close is not always going to be closing on the high or the low of the bar. So what you could do is actually, here to make this even better, probably the best way to do this is connect both of these to an OR node. And we'll plug this OR node in there. Alright, so now it kind of takes care of any kind of bar type that you might want to use. Alright, so there's my little improvement to the original MA bounce system. Alright, and so now with that, we kind of have our basis to work from. And so now we want to, let me slim up the chart here, compress the chart a little bit. So now we can work on isolating each of these signals here. Actually, I'm going to use the arrow instead. Okay, there. So we have those, and I might as well mark these now, otherwise I'll probably end up marking them later on. Okay. So we're going to work on isolating the first signal of the trend first. And actually, let me scroll back here. If I look back here, actually the first signal is right here. This actually is the first signal. So to isolate the first signal versus the second or third or anything after the first signal, it's going to require a different function node. But to isolate the first signal is fairly simple here. So we're going to grab a function node, and we're going to grab the signal blocker. All right, so what the signal blocker will do is it will allow our first signal to come through and then block all the remaining signals afterwards. So let's open the chart up. All right, so it'll allow the first one through, and then we'll set it up so it blocks the other long signals afterwards. So, time to organize these guys a little bit. All right, so the key to getting the signal blocker working correctly is this reset area. So this reset after essentially identifies how long you're going to keep blocking a signal. So this is like just a fixed value. So I could, let me just kind of set this up, and I'll block, basically, I'll block the signal after 100 bars. And here, in this output here, we have an output section here. You see it says blocked output. So I like to use this. I don't really see any I haven't really kind of found any practical way of using it in a system, but I like to use it to help me kind of to debug the signal blocker itself. And I like to put in a value of just like 0.1 in there, and you'll see what happens here when I do that. And oh, hold on. Okay, first I need to turn off these other resets here. There we go. All right, so you can see that there's a minor output here. So this output here is that 0.1 that I just put in. And you can see it goes forward basically 100 bars. It's counting forward, and then it stops blocking the signal. So as I look down my chart, right, we can see it allowed this signal to go through, which is actually the second signal. Let's look at the bigger picture. There we go. It's the second signal of our longs, right? And you can see the first signal on our longs got blocked, and that's because this short signal, you can see it's blocking all these signals, all these bars. It's blocking the signals from coming through until it resets on the 100th bar. So our first long signal got blocked. So we need to use the other reset functions to allow this long signal to come through. So the way we can do that is, you can see we have all of these. Let me click this again. There we go. So we can see we have all of these different ways to reset the function node so that it's no longer blocking signals. So when you reset it, what that's saying is you're not blocking the signals anymore. So for example, right, if we're blocking short signals, essentially we're kind of in a downtrend, right? Normally your system is going to be in a downtrend. And so with this moving average system, right, when the moving average is pointed down, and let me get rid of this. Yeah, it's time to upgrade this weekend. Upgrade your NinjaTrader. All right, so when the moving average is sloping down, that's when we're getting these short signals, right, these short bounces here. So that identifying that we're in a downtrend, and then of course the moving average is going to start sloping up. So what I can use is I can use this moving average to reset the function node when it changes direction, telling me that the trend has changed direction. So this it's this nice simple way of determining when your trend direction has changed to reset the signal node or the signal blocker. So what I'm going to use is the inflection solver. So I'm going to drop the inflection solver on here, and I'm going to set this up as a way to reset the signal blocker when the moving averages changes from sloping down to sloping up, and then obviously further down here the moving average is going to start sloping down again. So it's going to reset the signal blocker when these short signals appear. So let me plug it into the result node. And then this red moving average is the 55 EMA. So I'm going to switch this over to the 55 EMA. Now if we take a look at the chart, right, so we have a long signal indicating that the moving average is now sloping up, and then when it begins to slope back down, we get a short signal that is sloping back down. So I can use these signals to identify when the trend is changing direction. It's a very simple way. You know, I could also use this white moving average line to kind of identify when the trend is changing. You know, so there's multiple ways of doing this, but I'm just going to use this nice simple method here. So I'm going to plug this into the reset node there. And, well, see, let me point out one more thing here. So what we're getting from this inflection solver, and let me give this a name first. There. All right, so it's the EMA 55 inflection. All right. So you see how it's giving us a long output when we begin the long trend condition here. So we're going to use the long output to no longer block our long signals. And then of course further down the chart here, we're going to use this short signal to stop blocking these short signals as they come through. All right, so I'll connect our signal blocker back up. And I'm going to open up the reset section here. And we can look at all these different settings. So anything that's labeled input, where the first word is labeled input, right, that refers to this input node here. And anything labeled reset is referring to signals coming into the reset node. So we're looking for a reset, actually this one right here, the reset signal, as opposed to the reset opposite signal. right? So the opposite signal would be if we're using a short signal as a reset for a long condition, right? So remember, we're going to be getting long signals here, and so if we're using a short signal to reset these long signals, right? That short is the opposite of the long, so you'd be using the opposite signal in that case. But we're actually going to be using, let me plug that back in. So remember, we have a long signal coming in from this inflection solver. That'll be resetting the signal blocker here when we begin a long trend. So I'm going to be using this reset signal here. I'll set that to true. And now you can see this first long signal comes through now. So we can see here, let me scale this up a little bit. All right, so you can see we got the short signal coming through, and then we can see it was blocking for 2 bars. But then I guess on the 3rd bar is when we got that long inflection signal, which reset. So it reset our signal blocker. So now it's no longer blocking signals, and then it allowed our first moving average bounce signal to come through. And so now we're blocking any signal coming in for 100 bars. But we can see 100 bars is just not long enough, because now this second long signal comes through. So let's just crank this up here to 200. So this is something that you'll kind of have to determine is, how many bars do you need to block? Probably some of you are thinking, well, we'll just set it to 1,000 and be done with it. Yeah, that's probably a good idea. I kind of like to keep this to what I think is kind of a minimum. It's probably just an old, it's probably just my old train of thought with programming and stuff like that, where I don't like something staying active for as long as it doesn't need to be active. So I usually tend to kind of shorten things up. So I'm kind of trying to find an example to help explain this, why I do this, but I'm kind of failing at finding an example right now. So the bottom line is I like to try and keep this down to a minimum. So 200 seems to work here. Well, it looks like it's just, yeah, actually it is working. So I think right here we got our first inflection. Our first short inflection was, I think, right in here. So we can take a look at it again. Yep, so we can see right here on this bar. I'll just mark it, actually, I'll mark it with this little triangle. Yeah, so we can see on this little triangle, we stopped the signal blocker from blocking shorts on this very first one, and so that allowed this first short signal to come through here. So using the signal blocker accomplished our goal of isolating the first signal of the new trend coming through. All right, so we got the first signal of this new downtrend, and yeah, we can see it. You can just kind of make out that the hold on a sec. Let me turn off this auto scale. There we go. So we can see that the moving average started a new uptrend, and so it allowed this long signal to come through here. And let's take a look back and see what we get back here. So, let's take a look at this area right here. See what happened right there, because that clearly looks like a bounce. So I'm going to look at the original bounce signals here. And for some reason the system didn't catch this as a bounce off of the moving average. So that's not a problem with the signal blocker. It's a problem with the original moving average bounce signal coming through here. See if I can get this to come through. And there we go. All right, let's see if I can work on the original signal here. And so I'm going to try and figure out which one of these solvers is blocking the signal from coming through. Well, yeah, it does look like it's this one here. Let's see. Well, I don't want to get too sidetracked. So let me just kind of leave that disconnected for now. I'll work on that later if I have some time here. So let's plug the signal blocker back in. All right, so there we go. So now we have our first long signal after the uptrend. There we can see, yeah, the moving average kind of gave us a little switch back here, which kind of reset the signal blocker. And once again, we got another long signal, you know, as this little downtrend on the moving average occurred. Yeah, so that's kind of the, you know, we can see we're kind of like in this chop zone here, which definitely kind of messes with the signal here a little bit. But at least, you know, the logic is working correctly. So when the moving average slopes down, right, that's kind of resetting the signal blocker to allow another long signal on this little short uptrend here. So that is working for us on isolating our first signal of a new trend. There. So hold on a second. Let's see. I'm just going to take a quick look at the questions. So yeah, Bill's asking, are these recorded? Yes, Bill, these are recorded. And as I showed earlier, I showed how to get to the recordings. So, there we go. So, Bill, the way you can get to the recordings is go to BloodHound, learn BloodHound, and go to BloodHound, learn BloodHound, and then down here in the training workshop. That's where you can view the recorded workshops right there. Just click on that link, and that'll show you them. And then they're all listed by the archived month here. All right, so now let's work on isolating the second and third signal of the system. So this would be our first signal in this long trend. I'm going to squeeze the bars again a little bit. And so this would be our second long signal, and our third, and our fourth here. And pretty soon when we get to our third, you can see we're getting two signals, so we're going to have to figure out, you know, how to figure this one out so that the second signal of really what is, I would consider, our third signal in the trend, how the second bar of the third signal, you know, doesn't get triggered as like the fourth, you know, as a fourth occurrence in our trend. So we'll work on that when we get to it. So I'm going to pull this out of the way here, and what I can do is I can actually give this node a name. So I'll call it the first sig for signal, and I'm going to shorten up the name here. So there. So this is the first signal in the system. And so to capture the second, third, and fourth signal of the system, I'm going to need the signal counter here. So let's connect this guy up. And you'll see that this signal counter also has this reset section here as well. So I'm going to start by turning everything off there. All right. Now the way you begin to set this up is in the options here. So you can see that it has this counting up to. So this sets, you know, which occurrence of your signals you want to identify. So we're going to start by looking for the second signal in the trend. So if we go back to the chart, right, this will be our first one, our first signal here, and then this will be our second one. So I'm going to put some markers here. So this is kind of my quick way of numbering these. All right, so that's our first long signal in the trend. This is our secondary signal, and our third, and then our fourth. All right, so setting this to 2 is going to identify the second occurrence right here. And then we can set it to 3 and identify the third occurrence, and then change it to 4th to isolate the 4th one. Okay, so now the next option down is our look back period. So this this is needed to know, you know, how far back on the chart do you actually look, you know, for another signal. So if we're looking for the secondary occurrence, how far back do we look to try and find a this first occurrence? So clearly we need to look back more than 3 bars. So let's set this to 200. That seemed to work for our signal blocker. Now we can see that we're just getting one long continuous output now. So as it's able to look back 200 bars, it's always finding the first occurrence of a signal, always. So that's telling us is that we're going to have to start using some resets here. So essentially, to stop counting. So that these resets will get the counter to stop counting or to stop looking back. Just as with the signal blocker, right, we used this reset to stop the blocker from blocking, after 200 bars. Well, with the counter, we're going to use these resets to stop it from looking back when needed. And so I'm going to use this same inflection here for the reset. All right, just takes BloodHound a moment to recalculate. And I probably should shorten up the number of days on my chart here. So yeah, I'm using a 5 range on the CL chart, so that can generate an awful lot of bars. So let's see. I'm loading 3 days. I'm going to put this back to the 24/7. So loading 3 days. Well, let's see if I just load 2 days. We'll see if that helps here. All right. So when I changed the number of days on the chart, all right, it forced a refresh on the chart, which closed up the BloodHound interface. So I had to open it back up here using the BloodHound button here. So let me just set this back again. All right. So there, I've got the signal counter selected. And just like with the signal blocker here, where I'm using the reset signal, I'm going to use this reset signal on the signal blocker as well. So right there. So let me set this to true. And now I need to go back to where we were. There we go. All right, so now we can see that there it found our second occurrence and marked it. And what it's doing is it's marking it for the entire look back period. Right? So even as we count afterwards, the signal counter node is still looking back 200 bars. And so it's finding, it's finding this first occurrence and it's finding this second occurrence. So it's still finding, 2 signals as the bars continue to go forward in time. And that signal counter node is still looking back 200 bars to find these. And so it's still saying, yes, I'm finding our first signal and I'm finding our second signal as the bars go forward in time. And so that's why we're still getting this long continuous signal out. So if we wanted to clean this up, we would need to put a signal blocker afterwards. So we'll clean that up in a moment. So let me first kind of point out what this signal counter is still doing here. So if you look down here at BloodHound's output, all right, you'll notice I have the scaling here fixed. I have the scaling fixed so that we're locked to -1 to 1. And so you'll see when it finds the first long signal in our new uptrend, we have an output here that if we go along over here, it's 0.5. And then when it gets to the second signal, the output goes up to 1. So it's kind of a nice little feedback letting you know when it found the first signal here, and then when it finds the second signal, the output here equals 1. And what controls that is the output section down here. So you can see we have it in this analog mode right now. So there's two modes. There's analog and then there's a digital mode. I switch it over to digital. It does make a nice clean look. So now you can see that those 0.5 values are gone now, and we just wait until we get to the second signal, and then it gives us our signal output. So that's a nice clean look on your chart, but to help you kind of debug your system, to help you build your system, it's nice to leave it in analog mode until you're all done, and then you can kind of clean things up. And we can also see here we can see here on the shorts here that it got a short signal here which gave us a 0.5, and then we got a secondary short signal here which then the output was at -1, which gave us the signal marking the second short in this downtrend. So it kind of helps show you. Let's look at the original signals. Right, so there's the first short signal when the moving average starts sloping down, right? And then we got this second short signal in this downtrend until, of course, the trend changed to long just after that. Such is the market. And then let's look at these over here. So once again, remember I've got these marked. So let me put some more arrows identifying which occurrence they are. So there's our first short signal, and then this is our secondary one, and then our third one. And so we can see once again, the signal counter gives us this 0.5 output saying, hey, I found the first one. And then when it gets to the second one, then we get the actual signal out of it. So that's how we find our second signal. So let's look for the third one. So we'll find the third one, and then I'll kind of go back to kind of cleaning this up to give us just one signal bar out of this instead of this long continuous signal bar. So we'll clean that up afterwards. So first let's I'm going to show you guys how to find this third one here. So I'm going to drop down another signal counter, and essentially I just need to set it up the same as this one and just change one value. So let me plug the AND node into it, and I'll connect it up to the result node, and I'm going to need this reset solver here. Plug that in. Alright, so as we look at this bottom signal counter, right, I have 200 in there. So I'll put 2 and 200, and then, alright, just gotta there we go. And we have the reset signal is already set true for us, which matches this guy right here. So out of all these resets, only the reset signal is set to true. This one up here, it's set up the same way. And we can see this one up here is still marking our second one. So we need to change it so it marks our third one. So all we have to do is change this to 3. So count up to 3. Switch that, change that, let it recalculate. And oh, okay, so yep, that's right. So here's where we're kind of encountering our problem here. So see on this, let me change the scaling of the bars here. So remember how I marked this other bar here? So we're actually getting 2 short signals right here on this secondary occurrence, right? Just like on the longs here. Remember I put this secondary arrow on here marking that we're getting 2 signal bars on this third occurrence. So let me plug the original signal back in here. Yeah, see how we're getting 2 bars marked here? So the secondary bar of this, second occurrence of the bounce is being identified actually as the third occurrence because it actually is a signal coming in. Let's take a look at it again. All right. So the signals that are coming out of the AND node, right? We have a signal here, a signal on this bar, and a signal on this bar. So technically, even though this is our, even though we see it, as humans, we see this really as like the second bounce here, and this would be our third bounce right here. But technically, right, the computer sees this bar right here as the third signal. So what we need to do is clean up the signals that are coming in. So we need to clean up the signals from here that are coming into the signal counter. So we're going to have to take a step back and work on that. So you probably already guessed it. We're going to use the signal blocker to clean this up. And it looks like sorry guys, I think Amber Alert is actually coming in on my cell phone here. Sorry about that. All right, let me get back on track here. So the way this signal blocker is its default settings here. It's just defaulted right to resetting after 5 bars, and it also has these other resets as well. So let me kind of go through and explain how this is working. But first, let's just look at. First, I'm just going to look on the chart and just see if everything looks good. And yeah, so everything looks good. I don't see any, there's no more 2-bar signals anymore. So let me stretch this back out again. Okay. Okay, so with this signal blocker, I'm not using the reset signal. I'm just going to turn it off just so it's less confusing. But we are using the input here, right? So we have an input coming in. And so what this input no signal is doing is when there's no signal coming in, just like it says no signal, it resets the blocker. So hold on, let me change this to 0.1 again. Right, so when this, so let's take a look at our original signal. All right, so we have one on this area right here, right? We have 1 bar marked as a bounce. So we have 1 bar signal, and then we can see on this bar we have 2. That's why I have the secondary arrow here. So that's our original signal. So let's take a look at the signal blocker again. And so what happens is right afterwards there's no signal. So there's no signal coming in from the AND node right afterwards. Right, so we have this blank area here of no signals coming in. So this input no signal, so when there's no signal coming in, it's actually resetting the signal blocker. It's resetting this node. When we get this area in between signals, right, when we get this area in between bounces where there's no signal, well, this no signal area is resetting our signal blocker for us. And we can see by looking at the output here. Right, so we had, so after the signal comes in, the signal blocker is blocking for 1 bar, and then it stops blocking afterwards because there's no signal coming in. So the no signal into the input resets our blocker node. Now, if we look at right here, this area, we can see that it's blocking for 2 additional bars afterwards. And that's because, right, so the first signal comes in, it blocks the second bar, it blocks the second bar signal coming in, and it's still blocking it. And then when we get to the third bar, there is no signal coming in, and so that resets the blocker node. Right, so that's resetting the blocker node on the this third bar after. And so we can see that there's no more output, telling us that the signal blocker is no longer blocking signals, and so that allows this fourth occurrence to come in, and so forth. So really just kind of the default mode of this signal blocker is all we needed. So that's nice and convenient. And so with this cleaned up signal, I can take that, plug it into the signal counter, and that should give us the results we're looking for. And let me name this. So I can call it something like I'll call it my cleanup node there, and I'm just going to shorten the name there. So I know it's a signal blocker, and I kind of know what it's doing. So it's kind of cleaning up the signals coming out. So let's take a look here. What's going on? All right, yeah, perfect. So this is what we wanted to see. So remember on the short side here, remember it was counting this guy as actually the third signal, but really it's our second bounce, and it was marking the secondary signal of our second bounce actually as the third bounce. But now we can see it's actually now identifying the third bounce here correctly. So because we eliminated this secondary signal on this bounce here. Right, so there. So now, so we can see that we're only getting one signal here instead of 2 bars signaling the secondary bounce. So let me kind of clean these up a little bit. Alright, so this is marking our first signal. This one is marking our second signal, so I should name that. Alright, so that's our second signal. And I'm just going to strip out all the vowels, shorten the name here. And I'm going to make my names a little uniform here. There. And so this signal counter up here is identifying our third signal. And I always like to leave a part of the node's name in the name, so I know which node I'm working with. Just kind of tells me quickly which node I'm using. All right, so we can find the first signal. Let me shrink the chart up. There we go. So we have the first long signal, we have the first short signal. This guy will give us the second occurrence, and our second occurrence, and then that one will mark our third occurrence, and our third occurrence on the short side. So now we can see that we probably want to clean up, this signal coming out, so that we just get one signal bar instead of this, long continuous signal bar here. So hopefully you guys are kind of figured out by now that we need to use a signal blocker again. So let's drop in another signal blocker. So let's work on the second signal first. Let's work on the second occurrence here. There we go. So we'll work on the second occurrence and clean that up. All right, so I'm going to open up the reset section, and I probably don't need to go up to 200 bars anymore. But I probably don't. Well, I guess I'll just play it safe, and I'll put 200 in here just to play it safe. And let's see. And when I'm kind of working with these function nodes that have this reset section, I kind of like to start from scratch and I'll just turn them all off. Jeremy and I went through these and kind of tried to determine which ones are most commonly used, and so we turned the ones that we thought would be most commonly used and turned them all on and turned them on, just as a convenience there. But for me, I kind of like just to turn everything off and then figure out which one I want to use. And so once again, I'm going to use this inflection solver to reset this one. And let's see, that is actually, I believe, I'm using the reset signal. Yes, so it's the reset signal. Watch. Let me turn this back off. All right, so with this off, so if we're not using, basically all of these are turned off, so that means really this this function node, this inflection solver, this inflection solver that we're using as a reset, with everything turned off, it's not doing anything. It's all been turned off. So we can see on our chart that our shorts are not coming through. Right, they're being blocked. And we can, if I set this once again to 0.1, we can see, we'll be able to see, yeah. So we can see that effectively everything afterwards is being blocked here. And then when I start using this reset, right, the reset coming in here, set that to true. So there we go. Now we can see it's working correctly. So our second occurrence of the bounce is being marked with one clean signal on that bar, and on our short side is also being marked on just one bar, nice and clean looking. And we can see we still have the analog output from the counter, right? So we can see on our first occurrence of the long bounce, we're getting a 0.5 until we get to the second bounce signal here, or the second occurrence of our bounce signal, and then we get a signal out of it. So we can clean this up further. So as I showed you earlier, we can use this output style to kind of clean up the output. So I'll set that to digital. And let me go to this guy, and we'll set this one to digital as well, cleaning it up. And for me personally, I don't mind seeing this 0.1 output here. It doesn't bother me, but if it does bug you, you just have to go through these signal blockers and just set these back to 0 again. Right, so this signal blocker, you have to set it back to 0. This signal blocker, you have to set it back to 0. And let's see here. I can name this guy. So there, I just copied and pasted that name up there. There. All right, so I think we're done cleaning up our second occurrence of the bounce. Looks nice and clean. And of course we could just, drop another one down here, set it up exactly the same way. And get the same results. right, so that cleaned up, finding our third occurrence or our third bounce signal. So there we go. And to find our fourth one, well, basically we can just grab another counter node, set it up exactly the same, except change our counting up to, set it to 4, and just add another signal blocker afterwards. So I'll just rename this. Let me put a name on here. All right. So now, for back testing, all you have to do is just change which output here you want to go into the result node. So we can come back here, take a look at the first signal coming in, and test it. Test our system against the first bounce coming in versus the second bounce coming in, and versus the third bounce coming in. So, and I have a little bit of time left, so let's see if I can clean up things. See if I can clean things up in front of you guys. Right here, right here we got a short signal that, I really wouldn't want this in my system. So let's see if I can improve upon this. All right, so I think the reason why we're getting this short signal here is because we can see our EMA is kind of flattening out. So I suspect the inflection solver here is this inflection solver here. It's probably, if I remember right, it's giving us a bunch of signals here. Yep, so look, it's giving us a long, and then it flips down to a short, and then a long again before the trend actually begins to take off. So, how can we clean this up? Let me think about that for a moment. And I see there's looks like some questions or comments coming in. So let me address these first. Let's see. All right, so Ken's got a question here. Let me just read it. All right, so Ken's gonna. I'm gonna interrupt what I'm doing here just to answer Ken's question, because essentially I did accomplish what I wanted to show you guys, which is how to isolate the first, second, and third. And so I'm going to address Ken's questions first, because questions do take precedence. Now that I'm kind of completed what I wanted to show you guys today. So Ken is asking here, let's see, he wants to show slope of a moving average line may be shown in X degrees and get text email alert. All right, so the second part of your question is pretty easy, Ken. I don't know how you would get a text or email alert. I don't know of any system that does that. So I guess you'd have to find some indicator out there that does that for you. I don't know of anybody that's doing that yet. But to find to measure the slope of a moving average, that's easy to do. Now you can't do it in degrees. It's literally impossible to do it in degrees, because the slope degrees requires a fixed reference, and when you're working with a chart, you can't, some people say that, they can measure the slope in degrees, and they're really not. It's kind of a misnomer. You really can only measure the slope in ticks, right? Because the angle of your indicator is based on the tick value of your instrument. So let's here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new logic template, and I'll call this finding the slope. I'll move this over here. And so I'm going to put down a new slope solver. And you notice for most of you this solver pull-down menu looks a little different. And that's because I have a 13-minute chart higher time frame as a part of this system. And that's why. So I need to go into the default time frame, right? So the default time frame is whatever the chart is set to. So it's my 5 range on this chart. This is my default time frame. So I'm going to go into default time frame and then come down to the slope solver or indicator slope solver. Connect that up. And since I already have the EMA 55 on here, I will switch this over to the EMA 55. And in the default mode here, right, you can see it's just identifying if the EMA is sloping down or if it's sloping up. So we have parameters here. So we have a maximum slope and a minimum slope, and they're defaulted to ticks. So you can require a slope as a part of your system. So what I'm going to do is, if you're only looking for one type of slope, we're going to use typically you're going to want to use the maximum slope here. And if you look at our output section, you'll see in parentheses it says max, the second parameter down says max, and then the lower two say min. Right? So the lower two that say min apply to this minimum slope, and the same right here. Down here we have minimum slope and we have max in parentheses. So these upper two parameters apply to the maximum slope parameter here. So I'm going to, and we can see that these upper two parameters have a 1 in them. So that's what we're using. So this 1 is what's giving us this signal out, this value of 1. So if you look over here in our scale, our right side of the chart, on our scaling, we can see the output here is marked by 1 by the flag. So what I can do is I can start looking for how many ticks of slope that I want. So let's just start with something like 0.5. I think that's reasonable. There we go. Yep. So what this is saying is that my moving average is moving up at least half a tick. So the change of the slope from one bar to the next bar is half a tick. So to kind of illustrate this better, I'm going to add another EMA on top of that one so you can visually see it. Right, so chart trading and understanding your system is all visually based. So I'm going to create a visual aid here, and I want to use the hash. Let me put that down to 2. And So I'm going to put that new one on the top. There we go. All right, so these hashes, you can actually see the actual value of the EMA a little clearer. So you can see how the movement from one bar to the next bar. You can see the you can see the Y movement, or the price movement, right? The Y-axis here, the price movement. So let me bring up BloodHound again. So what we're looking for is a half of a tick in this Y-axis movement. That's what we're actually measuring. And so the reason why I said you can't measure degrees, because, well, degrees is relative. I mean, what if I stretch this out? Right? It really exaggerated this angle, so I'm changing the angle in degrees as I adjust my scaling here. Right? So you could say, yeah, that kind of looks like a 45 degree, right? So I'd say, well, all right, that's 45 degrees. Well, what if I stretch this out? Well, that almost looks straight up. That's like getting close to 90 degrees, so it's not 45 degrees anymore. So the real true angle that you're measuring is not really an angle, but it's a movement in the Y direction, because your bars are always a fixed X distance of 1. So your X scale down here is always 1. Going from bar to bar, its distance is always 1. The only scale that varies is our Y-axis scale. So if I go in here and say, well, I want a really, really steep slope of 1 tick, plug that in there. And so what that's telling me, if I scale this up, is that, well, I'll go back to here. So from this bar here up to the next bar, that hash mark is greater. It's either 1 tick or greater, and that's what we're measuring, is 1 tick or greater. So if we look at the output here, we're measuring greater than 1 tick. And also, so when we're at 1 tick, we're getting an output from the solver, and when we're greater than 1 tick, we're getting an output from the solver. So another way of saying that is that at 1 tick or greater is when that solver is giving us an output. So that's how you measure slope there. And also, if you things like that, you can go to our documentation page, and you'll see there's a menu here on the right hand side. And so under the references here, you can see there's the confidence solvers, all the solvers. So you can click on the indicator slope, and so here's the written documentation. And if you keep scrolling down, you'll see there's also a little more in-depth video here to kind of go further into that. And then some written examples here on the chart. All right, Ken. All right, so Bercy saying, all right, great walkthrough. Oh, okay. Thank you, Bercy. It's not really a question, just a comment. So, all right, so let me kind of get this out of the way and shoot. Well, you know what? I really don't want to get started on this. I only got about less than 10 minutes left here. So maybe if no other questions come in, I can work on this next week, and we can work on cleaning up this system here. We can work on cleaning up this system, see if we can improve some of the signals coming out of it. Let's see, let's take a look at, the first. All right, so I have the first signal coming in here. So I'm looking at the first signal of the trend. And so what we'd like to do is see if there's a way we can clean that up and get rid of that. And clean that up. Yeah, we might be able to clean up some of these. This one, I don't know, my first thought, it's a little tough because we're kind of in this chop zone. So it's like we need another set of logic to kind of keep us out of this chop zone. That's really what would kind of clean some of these signals up here. All right. So next week I'll start with this if other questions don't come in. So all right, let's see. Burst C looks like he's got a question here. Why did you not use the signal counter to spot the first signal? You know, I could have, but it would have been extra work. It would have been less. What's the word I'm going to use for it? Less intuitive. It would have gone around using it. It would have been a little more difficult, right? See, I only needed one function node to accomplish that. So if I used the signal counter, right, I would need two function nodes to accomplish that. So remember, I have the signal blocker, these signal blockers after the signal counters. So why not just get rid of the signal counter since I'm using a signal blocker here to begin with? So it's just a more effective way of just using the signal blocker instead of using a signal counter. You know, so I could have put a signal counter in front of this, but that kind of really defeats the purpose of the signal counter. You know, you don't need to count up to one signal because, you know, you're always getting, you know, the signal counter really is only effective when you're trying to count for your second or third or first, right? Because if I plug, you know, the original source, so this is our original source of all the signals coming in, right? So all of these are, in effect, kind of first signals coming in. So if I set the signal counter to 1, basically it's just going to let all the same signals come through. Okay, I see some, there's some more comments coming in. And all right, so Ken's asking, are we still working on the SI Renko? Yeah, we kind of had another discussion, and we made another minor modification to it, just to kind of simplify it. You know, it's always this weighing, you know, between giving too much sophistication versus keeping it simple for the average user. And so we're making another tweak to because of the. So I haven't shown you guys the major modification I made to this bar type, but essentially it's 2 bars in one now. So it's 2 bar modes in one, and when that happened, it kind of triggered. It kind of made it more complicated because now it has 2 modes. So now we're making a slight modification so that the secondary mode is easier to kind of understand. So that kind of set us back another week. So hopefully I will work on it this weekend, and Jeremy's going to plan on pushing it out on Monday. So yeah, just so you guys know, we're very close to pushing out another update, which is going to fix some Raven issues, and we really want to include, hopefully what we're thinking is going to be the final Renko bar in this. And and also some minor fixes in the Renko bar. So I'm really going to try and get that done this weekend on my part. So when we get that done, yeah, actually, you know what? That's probably what I'll go over next week is, if everything goes well and we do get that update pushed out, I'll probably talk about that a little bit too next Friday. So, all right, let me just read through some more comments coming in here and see if I just want to make sure if any of these are questions or if they're just comments. All right, so John is asking, not today, but one of these sessions, could you discuss some of the new functions, features that will be in the next release? Oh, sorry, John, we really don't like doing that because we just had too many unexpected things get us kind of sidetracked on stuff. So we have so many projects going right now, and we're kind of getting sidetracked with things, and so I think we just think it's kind of unfair to you guys to say, oh yeah, hey, look what we got, and then you have to wait 6 months later for it to actually come out. So we really don't. Jeremy hates it when I do this. So he really dislikes it when I talk about things that are coming out. So I'm sorry, John. I'm just gonna have to wait until Jeremy feels like he's close enough and comfortable to talk about something new coming out. So. All right, just reading this. All right, so JW is asking, okay, so I'm going to end the workshop with this. So JW, I guess you came in late because I mentioned this twice already, but he's asking, where can you find the archived webinars? And I'll show you here. Actually, there's two spots, so I'll use this opportunity to just kind of show you both locations. All right, so if you go to our menu, you can go to BloodHound, and you see there's a Learn BloodHound, or in the support there's a Learn BloodHound, and it's the same menu. So you see down here near the bottom it says Training Workshop. So we can click on that. It takes you to this page. Right, so if you're a licensed BloodHound user, this is where you can actually sign up here. And this is actually a link right here, this orange watch recorded webinars is a link. So we click on it, and it'll take us into the archived category. And you can see they're archived by date. So you can see they're all separated by month here. So this is where you can kind of cruise through, look at the descriptions of what's going on. And then let me show you a shortcut to getting to our YouTube channel. So you can also go to our YouTube channel. You see all these YouTube players have this little YouTube link. So you can click on that, and it takes you directly into YouTube. So it takes you directly there. And so here's another YouTube thing. So now you can click on our YouTube channel. So that takes you to our channel's kind of home page here, and from there you can go down and look at all the different recordings here. So I think if you click on recent uploads, yeah, so here it has different sorting methods. So I think it defaults to sorting by date, and well, and you can sort by most popular as well, but probably sort by date, and you can just look through. I guess you can look through them all quicker, and you can look at the title, description, and so forth. So there's two different resources. Also, if you really like watching this, you can subscribe to the channel, and so as soon as I get today's workshop uploaded to YouTube, which typically is tomorrow, tomorrow evening, usually Saturday evenings is when these typically get up there. If you subscribe, you'll get an email from YouTube saying, hey, there's a new video up here. All right, so that's kind of the quickest way to know when these recorded webinars are up and ready for you guys to watch. So, all right, guys. Well, with that, I will close it out and have a good weekend as usual. And I hope to see you all next week. All right. Bye-bye.